r/AskReddit. What's the saddest thing that happened to an old school friend you don't see anymore? I had my first girlfriend in 8th grade. I really liked her. She was my first kiss. We were practically inseparable for almost that whole year, which is a hell of a long time for a middle school romance. She ended up going to a different high school and we drifted apart after that. After I graduated I would sometimes get drunk and look people I used to know up online. But I could never find any trace of her. Years passed, and I stopped thinking about her as much. But I did still occasionally try to look her up. Always drew a blank. Finally, 15 years after 8th grade, I found something online. It was her obituary. She had died of cancer 3 years earlier. She was survived by her husband and 5-year-old daughter. I'm sorry, man. Got his face blown off by an IED in Afghanistan. Survived but his nose and one eye are gone. And he has some severe scarring. He'd just gotten married before going down there. But his wife apparently couldn't take seeing him like that, and they divorced not long after. Never been in the wife's shoes, and I'm positive it's ducking hard to tough through that but hit, man. Having your spouse leave after all of that? That's some rough hit right there. Sounds like being deployed sucks for a lot of people. Cheating, divorce, deaths, and potential homelessness. Edit. Apparently I've upset a few people for stating the obvious. Someone was going to say it anyways. My friend joined the army and was deployed twice to Iraq. He was discharged and came home with severe PTSD. He couldn't hold down a job and was on drugs from the VAP until after about 6 months they decided he was cured. Then he got into doing crack and started carrying around a gun with him. The last time I saw him, he was heading into the mountains at 2 AM in the middle of a blizzard saying this was the only way to get fresh powder. I haven't seen him since, and I honestly thought he had died, but I recently found out he was sent to prison after shooting his crack dealer and robbing him. Oh dude. That is crushing. A girl I was friends with in year 8 found out she was pregnant. I hadn't seen her at school for a week or so, and she wasn't replying to my texts. Turned out she hanged herself in her bathroom rather than face her parents, teachers, other kids, etc. She was only 15 and the only person who was nice to me. We were both outcasts at school. I saw the death notice in the newspaper and cut it out. I think I still have it in a stationery box of memories that I never want to revisit. Edit. A letter. Edit 2. I live in Australia. Glitch in the education system. State run. Between interstate travel and kids who had been held back at some point. The age variation wasn't uncommon. Year 8 had 13, 15-year-olds. Changes in my state were made that brings the education system more in line with the rest of the country. Edit 3. Nothing exciting in the box. Just random bits of writing. Teenage girls think their thoughts are so profound. Old letters, etc. Awkward teenage stuff, and I'm sentimental like that, so I kept it until I was 18. Then my parents divorced, and it ended up with one of them packed away somewhere. That's ducking bad. My friend Mike died of pneumonia because he went outside without pants on in December. It was 8th grade. Duckin' sucked. Beginning of sophomore year. Kid on my wrestling team died of pneumonia. It's so strange when someone dies that young. It was a lot to process. I didn't think a young person could die of pneumonia in the 2000s. Edited. Some things are better left in the past. Won't tell me why you're angry? I'll give you something to be angry about. There are a lot of drugs replies on this thread. But relationships are a hell of a drug. I don't think we'll ever know what happened. I'd long since lost touch with him. Life took us in different directions. He was a small town guy and was working in a stressful field. Some people said he was drinking a lot. Some people said he was buckling under the pressure of work. It was really just the two of them out there in a totally crazy foreign country. Who can guess what happened? I just feel devastated for his fiancé and his family. She was a really smart and creative girl, but had a horrible home life. Her dad suicided by jumping in front of a train. Her mum was psychotic and did messed up stuff like killing her pets in front of her. She ended up dropping out of school early and dated abusive older guys who got her into hard drugs. Killing pets in front of her? I've been on this website for like 3 years. maybe 4. In all that time, this is the most duck thing I think I've read. Evoked a genuine what the duck from me. What a sick piece of hit. My cousin's ex-boyfriend's dad did that to him once. He and his brother forgot to do their chores that morning before leaving for school, so their dad shot their dog and hung it from the tree out front so they'd see it when they got off the bus. She was an arty and bright girl who was in my English class. I didn't interact with her much, but she was always very kind. She pursued a PhD in philosophy. I ran into her at a train station 15 years ago, and we exchanged a couple of emails after that. 2 years later, she went out for a bicycle ride in our hometown and disappeared. Our hometown went through a massive search for several days. The entire city seemed involved. Her body was found near a large river. She had been assaulted and killed. No suspect was found until 2 years later, when they caught the killer, who subsequently confessed. What happened that they could catch the criminal 2 years later? He might have gotten arrested for a different crime that was somehow similar to her murder. That's how they got Jess Matthews for a murder he committed maybe a few years ago. He killed another girl more recently. Edited for wrong last name. I was really good friends with a girl from elementary school up until high school. She started hanging out with a rough crowd and pretty much told me to F off. Life moves on. I move out of town. A few months ago, my Facebook feed blows up with "Did you hear about what happened to friend?" I pull up the news story and she was messed up on drugs and killed her own 2-year-old daughter. She is in prison now. Holy hit, that's brutal. Hope it didn't affect you really much. I try not to think about it. She wasn't the same person I knew. The drugs did something to her and that person was lost forever. My best friend from school is now doing up to 20 years in prison for rape. I'm not all that sad for him, because if you're going to ape someone then you totally deserve the full force of the law, but he has 2 young children who suddenly are left without a dad. Not long before that, his brother committed suicide. Too. I feel terrible for his mother, losing both of her boys in the space of a year. I also feel terrible for his victim and for his children. I recently was on a jury for a case where a married man with 3 young boys had led a double life, where 6 girls, ranging between ages 7 and 26, had come forward about him either sexually assaulting or raping them. The wife had backed him up, saying he'd never do such a thing. And then as soon as she heard about what he'd been doing to the girls, she realized he'd been doing exactly the same to her. But because they were married, she'd never considered it as rape. All of his friends and family were so surprised by it, because he seemed like such a lovely man. But through court appearances, his true self came out, and they all realized they had been manipulated. We put him away for 21 years. And the only people I felt really bad for throughout the sentencing, not the court case, were his 3 little boys. Growing up and knowing what your own dad did would be awful. Of course, I felt dreadful for those girls. But the relief on their faces when they heard we'd found him guilty and he'd never be able to touch them ever again made the sadness on those 3 boys' faces stand out. We'd done exactly what we could for those girls, and that will forever stay with me. But those boys, never seeing their dad again and being way too young to understand why, did upset me a bit. Old bro from high school ran into his girlfriend's burning home to try and save her, but found that she had been stabbed to death by her ex-boyfriend, and it was him who caused the fire. Ex-boyfriend got 16 years in prison. He murdered someone and burned a house down and only got 16 years. Mortgages are longer than that. My longtime friend left for the army after high school. He was always willing to help people and do everything he can to make your day just a little bit better. On his 3rd or so year, he came back to my hometown on leave and accidentally pulled out in front of a dump truck and got T-boned. He's been in a coma for over 3 months with a broken back and severe brain damage. But just said good afternoon to his mother yesterday. I lost my brother in an accident 6 months ago, and I'm in tears of joy reading that your friend was able to speak to his mother yesterday. I have been watching my mother grieve, and I would not wish it on anyone. A parent's grief is unimaginable misery. She and some new guy she just met just recently murdered a man in a robbery. She was a sweet, cute, honor student. Drugs, drugs, Drugs are bad. Catch. Lost a buddy recently. He was a partier in high school, but he never hurt anyone and was a genuinely good guy. We played on the same baseball team all throughout high school. He got out of the small town we grew up in and got a degree all on his own. He met a very amazing girl, married her, and had a beautiful baby girl. 2 weeks after she was born, he was walking back home from a friend's place down the road. He had had a couple of beers and didn't want to drink and drive. He was walking on a sidewalk on the far side of a ditch and got hit by a drunk driver. The driver somehow made it across the ditch and was able to drive off. His poor wife searched for him for days and it was all over Facebook. It was truly gut-wrenching to see her plead and ask if anyone had seen him, especially so soon after he had just celebrated his baby girl being born. Edit. As far as knowing it was a drunk driver, I don't know the specifics, except that after the fact by a few days the wife had posted that they found the guy and that he was drunk and didn't remember it. I didn't ask for specifics as I assumed either her or the police had to find out through some pretty grim ways. The irony in this, it's fucking sad. The part one hate the most about drunk drivers is that it's almost always the responsible / innocent people that get ducked the most by the drunk drivers' hitty decisions. I've only heard of a couple cases where the drunk driver ended up worse off than his victims / kidnapped, brutally aped and tortured by a serial killer / weren't really high school or elementary school friends, but she was nice to me when her friends weren't. You don't say killed. Did she live? By a serial killer. What do serial killers do? A good friend of mine from high school went off and joined a frat in college. He was a good kid. Didn't do drugs. Rarely drank. Good grades. As a pledge, he was driving a car for an older brother trying to find a parking spot. He was pulled over for expired tags. The cops found weed, cocaine, and Molly in the car. Even though it wasn't his drugs, he took the blame. 5 years in prison. Why the duck would he take the blame? Unless it wasn't his car either. I'd question whether he really had 0% responsibility / knowledge for those drugs being in the car. I drive a guy somewhere. We arrive. Suddenly there's coke and Molly everywhere. But how? I'll let people in my car with drugs, but I make it clear to them that they are their drugs, and if we get stopped I'll be super surprised to hear they're there. Edit. For clarity. Because I said people and you're running wild with it. By people I mean people I know and trust who carry their drugs responsibly, will claim, and in responsible quantities. I'm not driving for the cartel over here. And my friends aren't junkies or on their third strike. I'm gonna be okay. I'm disabling inbox replies for this because I'm real tired of the armchair police and lawyer work. Got better things to do with my day. Like going to jail for 20 years because someone I've known for 30 wouldn't claim their dime bag. Heroin overdose and now he's 6 feet under. Left behind 3 kids. He was the class clown who got along and was polite and friendly with every clique. He helped me out of my shell in high school and was overall an awesome person. Damn. Reading through these comments I kinda get an eerie realization how many class clowns and people that generally seem really positive and satisfied with life end up backing into drugs and such. Reminds me of that saying about how melancholy men are always witty. Is the sadness, the difficulty what makes the good times good? Let's go with a combination of sad and funny. Old friend who's been in the Air Force for about 8 years now. Had ISIS hack his Facebook account a few months ago. I'm not sure what the end game is. In that case, all they did was post random Arabic messages. They didn't change any of the pictures or settings. I'm just picturing like a little 12-year-old terrorist hunched over a phone screen all day cackling to himself because he's spreading the good word of Allah through the massively influential social network known as Facebook. Script Kid EDs are the worst. Ducking like and subscribe.